Today we are going to be reacting to the top 5 best and worst counter traps from Classic YGO by TheDuelLogs. As somebody who loves a good old trap deck, as somebody who loves the hat format, as somebody who has played counter fairies for a very long time in his life, today I want to talk about some trap cards. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I am your guy with too many YouTube channels. Please go show some support for the creator in the pinned comment description down below. Mess that up, but we're rolling with it. Let's get into the video.
In the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, one of the major card types is traps, which often have powerful effects, but have the downside of needing to be set first, with some notable exceptions. Trap cards are divided into 3 separate categories: normal, continuous, and counter.
And I love me a good old counter trap. Those are my favorite kind of traps.
The first 2 types having spell speed 2 priority, and the latter being what constitutes spell speed 3.
And Dark Bribe is such, dude, if we're talking about Dark Bribe being one of the worst counter traps in Yu-Gi-Oh, that is so wrong. It's one of my favorite cards.
Normal and continuous traps can be chained by cards like monster quick effects or quick play spells. Counter traps can only be chained by other counter traps, making them the last part of the chain. This list will focus on some of the best and worst counter traps from the very beginning of the game before the advent of synchro monsters.
Now, I gotta say, before we actually continue on talking about trap cards, I love the way this is presented. Like, dude, I can't imagine how much work went into editing this video. I'm somebody who appreciates that type of stuff. I think it's beautiful. I love the background. I love everything. It's just, it doesn't go without notice, man. It's so cool.
And starting off with the 5th best counter trap, we have Negate Attack, which was first released as a promotional card.
The best? Out of all of the trap cards, the 5th best one? Oh, wait, we're talking about Classic, okay? Okay, never mind. I was thinking, like, there's so many counter traps that I've used in my day, and Negate Attack is not one of them, but I don't know exactly what point we're going to be drawing this off, but I don't think Negate Attack's all that great, guys.
In 2003's Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards for the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. It would later get its first mass market release in 2006.
Oh my god, dude. I forgot about that. Dude, the amount of nostalgia that just got unlocked in my brain from seeing that package is incredible.
It's Pack, Jade, and Yugi. Negate Attack can only be activated when your opponent's monster declares an attack. Once activated, the monster's attack is negated, and the battle phase immediately comes to an end.
It was good back in the day, and you know what, to be honest with you, every once in a while I've included it in a counter fairy deck, but it ends up being like just a very situational card. Like, it's helpful, but there's so many other counter traps that you might want to use.
Negate Attack is actually really good at saving you in a pinch, giving you an extra turn to make a comeback. While it may be overshadowed by more powerful battle traps and Mirror Force, Negate Attack was unlimited.
Yeah, this is the thing, though, because I don't know what format we're talking about over here. We're talking about Classic. Like, I'd much rather run a Mirror Force, a Storming Mirror Force, those types of things that just, like, affects the entire field instead of just negating everything.
Which Mirror Force was either limited or straight up banned throughout the Classic era. Additionally, because Negate Attack is a counter trap, its effects can't be responded to as easily as Mirror Force. For example, a monster might dodge Mirror Force's destruction effect by being flipped face down, by utilizing the commonly played Book of Moon. Another benefit of utilizing Negate Attack over Mirror Force is that because the battle phase is ended by the card, your opponent can't utilize a card like Call of the Haunted.
I see. Okay, I see where this is going. Obviously, that makes sense. And if we're talking about Classic Yu-Gi-Oh, and I wish that I knew the date of Classic Yu-Gi-Oh, of when exactly that cutoff date is there, so I can like compare it to other cards. But it's always been an okay counter trap.
An additional attack off. While Negate Attack is also good for stalling out turns, especially in decks that utilize Final Countdown, other cards like Waboku and Threatening Roar prove to be more valuable.
That's where I was kind of getting with it too. I love both of those cards. I'm a big fan of, do you say it Waboku? I've always said Wabuku. I guess that's probably not right now looking at it too. I'm a big Gladiator Beast guy. I have been for a very long time, so I do like my Wabuku.
As they can be played before the battle phase, with their lingering effects protecting you from attacks for the rest of the turn, thus being able to dodge spell and trap card removal. Still, Negate Attack proved useful enough to earn a spot on this best of list.
That's fair. That's fair.
Our next card, however, will kick off the worst counter trap list with a very niche effect. Okay. And in the number 5 spot...
Okay. Yeah, that's a horrible counter trap card. There are some things, man, and I get it, it's different back in the Classic days, but every once in a while you see a card come up and I'm like, why was this even made?
Of the worst counter traps list is Armor Break. It was first released in 2004's Ancient Sanctuary. Since then, Armor Break was only reprinted
Dude, I love looking at those old packs, man. I remember picking those things up.
More time in 2005's Dark Revelation.
That one too!
Armor Break's effect is to negate the activation of an equipped spell card and destroy it. Usually, counter traps and negate cards have some downside or cost, but that's not the case for Armor Break. It's so niche that Konami must have felt fine just letting it be a straight up negate.
I don't think I've known anybody to use this card in the entire history of the game, but hey, you know what? The artwork's nostalgic.
But that's also its downside. Not a lot of decks used a plethora of equipped spells in this era. In fact, there were maybe 2 targets this could often negate: Snatch Steal and Premature Burial, which was common enough in most deck lists.
Okay, that's fair. You know what? That's fair, but I still can't see anybody running that.
There is one problem, however. Since equipped spells have to stay face up on the field to have their effects activated, you could just destroy the card instead. Just like how Snatch Steal and Premature Burial were universally played, so are the 3 most common back row destructions: Mystical Space Typhoon, Heavy Storm, and Breaker the Magical Warrior.
You know what? I don't know why that didn't even come to mind, but that's just another reason not to use Armor Break, obviously.
That wasn't enough. Dust Tornado and Raigeki Break, both of which could destroy the equipped spell, were commonly played as well. Why even use Armor Break at all then? It
got the
could
spell
be a funny
speed 3.
option playing against a friend with a Mahavalio deck, but that's about it.
What the hell? Did people play Mahavalio decks? Again, some of them, dude, I love looking at classic Yu-Gi-Oh artwork, man. So nostalgic.
Sometimes being too specific can't make up for not having a cost, but that will be a running theme in this worst of counter traps on our list. And at number 4 for our best counter trap is Magic Drain.
Dude, I used to use this back in the day. I'm a big Dark Bribe guy, I will say, but this certainly had its uses and had its play back in the day.
Which was first released in 2003's Pharaoh Servant, with its most recent reprint coming in 2023's 25th anniversary version of the same pack. Magic Drain can be activated in response to your opponent activating a spell card. When you do so, your opponent is given the option to discard a spell card or have the activation of their spell card be negated. While most counter traps have a cost for the user, Magic Drain offloads the cost on your opponent.
And it always made for an interesting play too, because you could then gauge how important this activation was for your opponent. Kind of made for some fun mind tricks.
Makes it a great backup negate card. If the spell card your opponent is playing is extremely important and or is limited at the time, your opponent is more incentivized to discard a spell.
And you might know too, you might be able to tell, do they have any alternative strategy right now? Do they have anything that they're comfortable with? It's like, okay, you know what, I can do without my Rhoda right now.
Have one. This turns Pot of Greed from a +1 in card advantage to just breaking even, and Graceful Charity from breaking even into a -1. If your opponent doesn't have a spell card to discard, the spell will just be negated, making Magic Drain combo well with cards that hand rep like that.
Yeah, this was always actually a very underrated card. Nowadays, I would never use it. I still to this day use Dark Bribe, but never's a strong word. I like to have fun with my counter fairy decks and sometimes just play with some random counter traps that I probably should use alternatives to, but it's always fun.
Gonzalug and Trap Dust Shoot. The only reason Magic Drain isn't higher on this list is because it isn't a force to negate. And sometimes that guaranteed negate is better than the card advantage you can gain. The
Agreed.
next card on our list also negates spells, but in a far worse way.
Uh-oh.
And at number 4 on our worst of counter trap list is Spell Stopping Statue.
I don't even remember this card. Activate only when your opponent activates a continuous spell card. Negate the activation and the effect of the card to destroy it. I don't remember that one.
It was first released in 2005 as a Lost Millennium and was reprinted in 2006 Dark Revelation.
Dude, these packs are my favorite part of the video. It's bringing me back to being a kid again. Look at both those things.
Volume 3. Spell Stopping Statue can be activated when your opponent activates a continuous spell card. When you do so, the activation of the continuous spell card is negated and the card is destroyed. Similar to Armor Break previously on this list, Spell Stopping Statue doesn't have an additional cost, and the cards it negates can be destroyed instead of negating them, since they have to remain face up on the field for their effects to work.
Back in the day, how many people really played any continuous spell cards? I'd have to really think about it. But now that I'm thinking about it, now that we're talking about all these different cards and what the DuelLogs is saying, I feel like we're talking about really classic. I'm talking real early 2000s and then kind of having the draw off there.
Unlike Armor Break though, Spell Stopping Statue doesn't have a universally played target that it can negate.
Well, there
In
you
fact,
go.
you'd be hard pressed to find good targets during this era of the game for Statue to negate.
That
With
answers
the
my
best
question.
ones being floodgates like Level Limit Area B and Dimensional Fissure. While there
Okay, yeah, I remember people did their Dimensional Fissure, but I never really ran into anybody using Level Limit Area B too.
are a few other good continuous spells, they appear far less frequently than one would assume.
Yeah.
It really feels like Konami made Spell Stopping Statue because they could, and not because it was actually needed. And yet this is only the 4th worst on our list.
I can't even think about what would be the worst one, to be honest with you. Nothing's coming to mind.
We've got some real stinkers coming up. But for now, back to the best counter trap list. And at number 3 on our best of list, we have Dark Bribe.
That's my go-to. This is all I have always played Dark Bribe, and I have always played Solemn Judgement, depending on like the legality of Solemn Judgement. Dude, I don't care that my opponent draws a card. Give me that spell speed 3 for sure negate for both a spell and a trap card. This is such a underrated card.
A counter trap that was first released as a promotional card for the 2007 video game Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Tag Force 2 on the PlayStation Portable. It wouldn't get a mass market release until late 2008 in Dark Legends. Dark Bribe can be activated in response to your opponent's spell or trap. Your opponent draws one card, and their spell or trap card's activation is negated and destroyed. While letting your opponent go +1 in card advantage to ensure a negate may seem a little ludicrous now,
No, I'm good. I mean, I'm talking about like, if we're talking about modern game, I'm talking about hat format, and previous to that, I always use this card.
have to remember the context of the game when Dark Bribe released. There were barely any hand traps in the game at this point, and the games were usually slower.
I don't even care about the hand traps. Give me that for sure negate for both a spell and a trap.
This meant that giving your opponent a draw, while not ideal, might be worth it depending on the card you negated. Dark Bribe could be vital in helping you win the game by stopping a pesky battle trap like Mirror Force, or can stop your opponent from going for game by wiping out your back row with cards like Heavy Storm. This card is really good, despite the -1 in card advantage. But it had one other major issue with it at the time. By being a video game promotional card, it wasn't the easiest to get a playset of at the time.
I never really thought about that. I always thought that was kind of weird, especially for like a competitive game. Like, why are cards like difficult to obtain, and then, you know, you wonder why the people start falling out of love with the game and all that.
It was reprinted a year later. This was after the release of the first Synchro Monsters, the hard cutoff line for our list. Had Dark Bribe been a little bit more accessible, it might have netted a slightly higher spot in our list. Alas, it's time to return to our worst of lists. And at number 3 for the worst of list, we have Counter Counter.
Dude, you know what's funny? I distinctly remember running into this back in the day. I was playing in a tournament and somebody actually had Counter Counter in their deck, and they got a 1-up on me from it. I will never forget that, dude.
A counter trap card first released in 2007's Tactical Evolution and was reprinted once in 2008's Champion Pack.
Oh my god, the Champion Pack too. Dude, did the DuelLogs have a video? And I just watch them every now and then. I should watch them more. Very, very well-produced videos. Do they have a video on like old Yu-Gi-Oh packs? Because like I'm feeling a lot of memories flood back from these.
Getting one reprint seems to be a recurring theme with these bad ones. Counter Counter can be activated to negate the activation of a counter trap card and destroy it. This feels more like a gag than a real card, yet here we are.
Dude, I can't imagine, like, I can't imagine, like, actually putting this in a deck and thinking, like, yeah, I'm going to stop someone's, like, Solemn Judgement or something like that, but it works.
Type of counter traps that make great negate cards are typically wide-reaching in their negation abilities, while not having too steep of an activation cost. They can often negate all traps by default, and yet Counter Counter is here to only negate other counter trap cards. This card might make for a great joke amongst friends. I'll counter your counter trap with my Counter Counter, but could never be used seriously in any level.
But it can. It actually can. In previous formats, it can, and I got hit with it. I will never forget that, man.
Let alone Classic Yu-Gi-Oh! While the card is pretty unplayable on its own merits, what if I told you there were versions of this card that were actually unplayable? In its original printing, some versions of the card were misprinted, not having the counter trap symbol on it. That means the misprinted versions were normal traps, making them spell speed 2,
oh my
and
god,
were unable to be activated in response to the cards they were meant to negate.
Oh, how would that actually work in a tournament? Yeah, I guess you couldn't because it's not a counter trap. Oh, that's so funny.
Since they were all spell speed 3. The reprint of Counter Counter corrected this misprint, not that anyone noticed anyway. And at the number 2 spot of the best of list goes to Pulling the Rug.
Another card that I used so often. Again, guys, I'm a big counter fairy guy. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, I looked off to the side now. I'm recording these videos while my baby's sleeping, and she just stuck her arm out of the crib, so I'm hoping she doesn't wake up and I don't have to pause this recording. But, oh my god. Yeah, this is a very, very underrated card, especially back in, like, somewhere around 2010. Oh my god, yeah, this is... I love this with my, like, nice, bountiful cards, too.
A counter trap first released in 2007 Strike of Neos. Its most recent reprint came in 2023's OTS Tournament Pack 23.
To be honest with you, I still think Dark Bribe's better than Pulling the Rug. But I understand. I understand. I understand why people would say pulling the rug's better.
Was a welcome sight to the Time Wizard players in the community. Pulling the rug can be activated in response to the effect of a monster whose effect is activated when it's normal summoned. The activation of the effect is negated and the monster is destroyed. Basically, the easiest way to think of this card is that it's used when a monster has a when this card is normal summoned or tribute summoned effect. The effect is rather weak now, with the game revolving around mostly special summon monsters, but in the past, however, many of the best monster effects activated when a monster was normal summoned.
And this was a card that you can kind of pull out from anything. There were so many people running so many decks where, you summon this card, I get effect.
With the best examples of these being the Monarch cards. The
Yeah,
Monarch
that too.
effects activated when they were tribute summoned, and with many of them having very powerful effects, pulling the rug became a very useful card to stop them in their tracks.
And it felt so good too. It's just such a good card to pull out. It's so much fun to just stop people in their tracks like that. And there's nothing they can do with the spell speed 3s too, and they don't even get their nice priority.
There are some caveats to what pulling the rug could be used on though. If an effect is optional, like Mobius the Frost Monarch's effect is, and the controller of the card chooses not to activate the effect, you can't use pulling the rug to destroy the monster. Additionally,
Sorry to take a quick pause on the recording there, everybody. Somebody ended up joining me over here, and she is tired. We went for a big long swim earlier before I ended up coming home and recording videos today, so I had to greet her out. I can't not greet her, but she's coming downstairs to say hi.
ignition effects, which have a turn player priority in this time of the game's history, can be activated on summon, but don't trigger pulling the rug's activation cost. Obviously, these factors didn't stop pulling the rug from scene play, which really came to head slightly after synchro monsters were introduced to the game.
Yeah, now I never actually played this card at all when in regular decks. I played this a lot in my Counter Fairy deck.
However, this does allow the top card of the best of list to edge it out, but before we get to that, we have to return to the worst of list. And at number 2 on the worst of list, we have Featherwind, a counter trap that was first released in 2005's Elemental Energy.
You know, it's funny, when I was a kid, I wanted to make theme decks really bad, so there was a time where I had Featherwind included in one of my decks. When a spell or trap card is activated while you control face up, Elemental Hero Avian, negate the activation and destroy it. Dude, for such a weak little card to stay on the field like that, that's crazy.
And was most recently reprinted in 2011's Legendary Collection 2, the Duel Academy Years Mega Pack. Featherwind can only be activated in response to an opponent's spell or trap card activation, but only if you control a face-up Elemental Hero Avian. If you meet that requirement, the spell or trap card's activation is negated and the card is destroyed.
Dude, it's out of all of the cards that you need to keep on the field, it's this little P monster with 1,000 attack.
So, the major issue with this card is the requirement of controlling an Elemental Hero Avian to activate the card at all. Elemental Hero Avian is a level 3 Wind Warrior Normal monster with a measly 1,000 attack and defense.
And realistically, how many people are running 3 copies of that in their deck?
Allowing it to be easily trampled over by most normal summon monsters at the time. Additionally, the only decks that would want to use the card at the time were the original Elemental Hero decks that focused on turboing out their boss monsters.
And I tried so hard, and even to this day, man, I try so hard to make a classic Elemental Hero deck work. It just never works out.
Elemental Hero Flame Wingman, and Elemental Hero Thunder Giant. However, some of the monsters could be replaced by using King of the Swamp, which also doubles as a polymerization searcher. Additionally, using the normal Elemental Hero monsters quickly went out of fashion with the rise of better Elemental Heroes.
And yeah, besides very, very, very classic Yu-Gi-Oh, they were pretty well unplayable.
Obviously, Featherwind didn't see play as it wasn't worth leaving a weak monster that was best used for a fusion material on the field just for a spell or trap card.
Dude, nowadays I'm going to summon my Elemental Hero Avian. I'm going to equip Moon Mirror Shield to it. There's nothing you can do with it. I can have my Solemn Judgement face down for any protection. Then I can use my Featherwind.
Okay. The sad part is, if the card wasn't tied specifically to Avian and worked with any Elemental Hero...
What's this card? I'm not familiar with this one. When a spell or trap card is activated, banish one face-up Elemental Hero monster you control until the end phase. Negate the activation if you destroy that card. If you control Elemental Hero Terra Firma, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon one of your Elemental Hero monsters that is banished or in your hand or a graveyard, ignoring summoning conditions. Dude, that's actually a crazy card. Oh my god.
Would have been very playable. Like a classic version of Protection of the Elements.
Oh yeah,
but
it'd be like a War
move
Chariot.
On to the top card of our best of list. And the number 1 spot of the best of list goes to Solemn Judgement.
Yes,
a counter trap
yes,
first
yes.
released in 2002's Metal Raiders.
Dude, every single time that I have 3 copies of Solemn Judgment in my deck. I don't care that I pay half my life points. Sometimes you need that negation. I am all over the Solemn cards, especially Solemn Judgment.
with its most recent reprint coming in 2024's 25th Anniversary Rarity Collection too. Solemn Judgement can be activated in response to your opponent's summoning of a monster, or activation of a spell or a trap. Once Judgment is activated, you pay half your life points and negate the summon or activation of that spell or trap. The running joke in the Yu-Gi-Oh community is that you flip this card up and the text just says no. It's a pretty accurate joke as well,
Yeah.
considering Judgment tends
You remember, I kind of forgot about that. That's actually so true.
to be the most used counter trap and the end of any chain. Solemn Judgment is probably the counter trap that pops up in most people's heads first when you mention counter traps in the first place.
Yep, and I've always loved this card, and I don't care that I pay half my life points. Sometimes you need that negation, and it's just a game winner. It's the ultimate protection. It's the ultimate halt to what your opponent's doing as well.
Judgment is realistically the best counter trap in the entire game's history, let alone the classic era. However, it took players a while to figure that out. Paying half your life points was a big enough deal in the early game's history that many players shied away from using Judgment.
I am a proud member of always using Solemn Judgment, and I included a couple draining shields in my deck with that as well.
Mindset of using life points as a resource and the only life point that matters is your last one simply just hadn't been invented yet. So players saw their life points as being far more important than they actually were. As a result of this, Solemn Judgment managed to stay unlimited through all of the classic era of Yu-Gi-Oh!
I always had
which is a little
3.
insane considering how many other powerhouse cards were banned or limited during this time period.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I've never actually thought that Solemn Judgment should have been banned.
Solemn Judgment wouldn't be limited until September 2009's Forbidden List, a little more than a year after the release of the first Synchro Monsters. While the players in the past were ignorant of how good Judgment was, players who play older formats now, such as Goat or Perfect Circle, have utilized Judgment heavily in their decks.
Yeah, and it's funny circling back to that now and how like different play styles change. If you're like thinking about any sort of retro format in Yu-Gi-Oh, now like the people are so much more willing to use things like Judgment. It's funny.
The idea of taking lessons learned from future metas back to the past ones is why many people like Time Wizard formats.
Agreed.
Which have proven that even a card underrated during its era could be far better than once thought.
And I don't play too much. I only play Hat and Edison format. I wonder if, I'm sure it is at some point. I'm not talking about Judgment specifically. I'm talking about like underutilized cards. I'm sure that they're having some big issues with some cards, like, you know, being legal and nobody knew at the time how good they were.
Or in the case of Solemn Judgment, you might just find the best counter trap of that era. But with every best, there must be a worst.
All right, let's see it.
Which
Let's
brings
see
us
it.
to the final card of this video. And at the top of our worst of list, we have Snake Deity's Command.
I don't even remember this card. And I tried making Venom deck so many times in my life too. Activate by showing your opponent one Venom monster in your hand. Negate the activation effect of opponent's spell card and destroy it. Yeah, that's a bad trap card. Yeah. You know what? I think the Avian counter trap's worse than this. Or armor. Nah. Or armor break. Yeah, because you know what? At least in a Venom deck, you could have Venoms in your hand. I actually disagree with this being the worst one.
Counter trap first released in 2007's Tactical Evolution. This is the part where I normally tell you about the card's reprints, but it has none. When you activate Snake Deity's Command, you must first reveal a Venom monster in your hand.
Now, I'm sorry to put a pause over here. I never realized, I might be pronouncing this wrong, Venomanaga? I never realized, like, how prominent and I don't know how else to say this, guys. I'm sorry. I don't know. I'll say chest. I don't remember the card being like that.
Afterwards, you can negate the activation and effect of your opponent's spell card and destroy it. So, starting off, the cost of activating this card doesn't seem too bad. Instead of discarding an archetype card, you just have to reveal one, which is an easy enough task. While Command only negates spells, that's not too bad for a rare from an older set. The issue, though, is what archetype it belongs to.
Okay, I guess that's true, because who plays Venoms? Nobody has ever played Venom ever except probably me.
Venom might be one of the worst archetypes in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Being bad back then and receiving very little support since the classic era. The Venom archetype's theme is placing Venom counters on monsters your opponent controls. And with any counter-based theme, the deck will only be as good as what you can utilize those counters to accomplish. In Venom's case, the counters don't actually do anything on their own, requiring Venom.
Okay, you know what? He's winning me over. And I understand the point. Yeah, because at least the hero decks sometimes have Avian in their deck, right?
Venom swamp to be faced upon the field to have any effect. Venom Swamp can place a venom counter on each face-up monster during the end phase. It makes all monsters lose 500 attack for each venom counter on them, and destroys any monsters whose attack has been reduced to 0 by venom counters. But get this, if a monster's attack is originally 0, it can't be destroyed by Venom Swamp's effect, because it only works if it's reduced to 0.
Oh my god, I didn't even know that. Dude, this is some of the things, like, I get that one, but there are so many dumb rules in Yu-Gi-Oh! We'll talk a little bit more about that.
Many of the Venom monsters have the ability to place Venom counters on monsters, but they all have woefully low stats.
They're
Venom's
horrible.
boss monsters also are pretty bad.
Oh, I guess her chest always was like that. I've actually never noticed that, dude. Why does Phenomenaga have such a nice figure for such a horrible looking card? What the hell? I've never noticed that. Like, even little perfect belly button in the 4-pack over there. That's so funny.
Having obscure summoning methods and nothing to do with the actual Venom counter mechanic. I think it
Oh my
should
god,
be
it's in the Rise card too. I'm never going to be able to unsee this.
now that this archetype is dreadful to use, even in a slower meta, which brings us back to Snake Deity's command. Yeah, all you have to do is just reveal a Venom monster, but then you'd be playing a Venom deck, and that's just awful.
Understandable.
But more importantly, why doesn't it put Venom counters on anything? This was the perfect card to slap a then place a Venom counter on monsters your opponent controls.
Oh my god, that's actually kind of true. That's so true. That would have made that card, like, actually usable.
But no, we get a worse Magic Jammer because going -1 is better than playing Venoms.
Yeah, that's true too. But man, I actually really enjoyed that. I need to watch this channel more than I actually have, guys. Please go show some support for the creator in the pinned comment description down below. And speaking of dumb rules in Yu-Gi-Oh, when I started the channel, I made a video on the dumbest rules of Yu-Gi-Oh. You can check that video out here. I go off, and I would love to have you guys over there. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Take care, guys.